Dr. Kimberly Willard works in a career where Latinos are grossly underrepresented, but she evens out that underrepresentation by hard work, intelligence, professionalism, and altruism. If you are a Latino thinking about a career in the medical field, Dr. Willard holds your hand throughout this episode and takes you step by step to help answer all your questions. She talks about her experience as a first-generation Latina biology student at UCLA. She shares her experiences of applying to various medical schools and what that entails. She gives details about her experiences as a first-generation Latina medical student, and she concludes her final journey to becoming a doctor after medical school. What is most impressive about Dr. Willard is her selflessness to give back to the Latino community. Her list of community services is nothing short of what exemplifies a community leader. Her active participation in Hippocrates Circle and the UCLA Latino Alumni Association is helping the next generation of Latinos pursue a university education and open their eyes to a potential career in medicine. Trust me when I say her altruism doesn't stop at only those two organizations. Her resume is replete with volunteer work that would be too long to list. Dr. Willard knows no limitations. Her dedication to helping others without payment extends all the way to Paraguay, where she did volunteer work as a physician to help with operations that involved cleft lip and pellet repairs. Not only is she a great example to her local community, but she is an example to the world. I would imagine doctors become doctors because they want to help humanity. Dr. Willard is literally doing that in all aspects of life, and she's doing it with great passion. Dr. Willard is forming the foundation of next generation Latinos to realize that a career in biology, chemistry, and physics is possible. When it is all said and done, Dr. Willard will one day look at the statistics of Latino doctors in America and the percentage will have risen. She will smile and know she had a participating hand in that. Hey everyone, I'm Nicholas Aguirre. I'm here today with Dr. Kimberly Willard.
Hello.
She is a pediatrician, and I'm happy to have her on the show today. Dr. Willard, thank you for making time for us.
Of course.
How's your day so far being a pediatrician?
It's busy, but it's fun. There's always something new to see, new to learn at work, so it's been good.
I feel like it's a job, it's a career that never gets boring. Am I right?
No. It's the kind of job where it's really hard to gross me out because there's always something interesting that you're going to see. I've pulled boba out of eardrums, that kind of thing. So yeah, to quote you, it's not boring.
Do you mind telling us how a boba got in the eardrum?
Oh, the kid put it in there.
That's funny. Okay, so this is my first time getting to know you. This is the first time I actually get to meet you, so I absolutely know nothing about you. I think you have a fascinating background that our audience will get to know very shortly. But I always like to start off with, where are you from? Are you from Los Angeles?
I am. Born and raised. I'm from the SGV. I grew up in Hacienda Heights. And then I went to college at UCLA. I got my bachelor's in biology there, the minor in Latin American studies. I took a little break in between college and medical school, where I taught high school for a couple years. I did a post-bac as well in San Diego. And then went to med school in Kansas, and then have been back in SoCal ever since.
You definitely have an interesting history, and we're going to break down each part of that history.
Of course.
So what high school did you go to? Did you go to high school in Hacienda Heights? Or?
I did. I went to Los Altos High. We won't say what class. Forever 21, of course.
I know you reached out to me saying that you really wanted to talk about your experience as a first generation Latina college student.
Sure.
So I want to say, what made you choose UCLA?
I think it's a great school, has a great name. There's a lot of opportunities that go with being a UCLA grad. But I think also as a first gen, I was really scared to go far. And being from LA and being from a tight-knit family, I had the opportunity. I didn't apply to a lot of schools. I definitely want to say that. My family didn't have the money for me to do that. And I didn't know that I could have applied for waivers and whatnot. So I applied to a couple schools and I got in. And so of the two, UCLA seemed like a better fit for me.
At UCLA, what made you major in biology?
So I picked biology because I thought that's what I had to do to go to medical school. Because there's line of thinking where you have to be a science major, you have to do this, you have to do that. And it turns out if you want to be a med school applicant, and I think the same probably holds true for dental school, vet school, whatnot, you really don't have to be a science major. You could be anything. I mean, if basket weaving existed, you could probably do that. The key is take the prerequisites and do really well. And a lot of schools actually like it if you're not a science major because you're a better rounded applicant and you have more to bring to the table than someone who can just recite a bunch of biochemical pathways. So I picked bio. I mean, I liked it, but I definitely had other interests. I think there were other fields where I might have been stronger, but at the end of the day, it got me where I needed to go.
When did you decide that you wanted to go to medical school?
I was one of the weird kids that just always knew. Like from the time I was a toddler, like I remember my favorite toy was the doctor's kit, and I used to have this little toy ambulance, and I just knew. I don't think that that's very common for most people in my field. But I knew I wanted to be a doctor. I knew I wanted to go to college. But as a first gen, there weren't really any examples showing me how to do that. So the practical application of everything became a lot harder as time went on. So I feel like I stumbled a lot compared to somebody who maybe had more guidance.
To me personally, the sciences have always been a struggle for me. I don't know why. Is it because of my lack of interest or because teachers never made it fun for me? Did the sciences come naturally to you?
No. No, I had to work really hard at them. I liked them, but I think UCLA is a very intense environment. I mean, I tell my patients this all the time, those who are interested in going. And I tell them, you can do well. It's definitely doable, but be prepared to work harder than you've ever worked before, because you go from being top in your class without that much effort to like everyone is smart and you're suddenly struggling, just to be average. So, no, I don't think I was especially gifted when it came to the sciences. I worked really, really hard to do well.
It's funny. I hear a lot of doctors or a lot of people in the medical profession that say, no, the sciences never came naturally to me. That's why I had to work my ass off. But then really, I think deep down inside, they are just good at the sciences, but college just maybe takes it to a whole nother level where you might not feel that way, that like, oh, maybe I didn't know the sciences as well as I thought.
I just think I worked really, really hard. Like, I think, as I went on in training, it was just a matter of getting used to volume of material, right? Mm-hmm. So, at UCLA and at several other UCs, they're on the quarter system. So everything's jam-packed into 10 weeks. When you go on to medical school, you're getting, minimum 3 hours of lecture a day, sometimes 4, and then you have your anatomy. And then, so the way my medical school did it was they crammed everything, like every organ system, into 1 month. So you're getting 60 lectures a month that you're tested over. So for me, I think it wasn't necessarily having an aptitude for science or anything. It was just learning how to manage a lot of info in a very little amount of time.
So talk about your experience as a first generation Latina at UCLA, like your freshman year, sophomore year. Like, what were you feeling? Who did you go to for mentorship, or were you ever lost? Just
all the time.
Just take it from there. What do you remember?
I just remember feeling overwhelmed a lot. I remember going through my classes and not having a lot of students that looked like me. There's a few people that I still talk to from back in the day. But Latinos, we have a lot of work to do in terms of getting better representation at the university level. And I just remember thinking so many times, gosh, I wish there was somebody that had been through this already that could point me in the right direction and could tell me that this is all going to be okay. And I definitely called my mom crying a lot. I owe her a lot.
I know that nowadays there's like a lot of support at the university level. Like if you need help with writing, you go to the writing center. If you need help with math, you go to the math center. Did a lot of those centers or those help destinations exist while you were at UCLA?
They did. There's a program. It still exists today. It's called the Academic Advancement Program, and it exists on campus for first-generation students. And there's free tutoring services and support networks. And I did utilize them, definitely. But I just think the nature of the institution is so intense that, like, even with that, I felt lost a lot of the time.
Talk about your biology classes at UCLA a little bit. You said that it made you feel average, or you're competing with a lot of people at the same time. There's a lot of competition. How did you do it? How did you survive being a bio major at UCLA?
I don't know. That's a good question. I still ask myself that. I'm very proud of that piece of paper on my wall because...
you should be. I see the big smile on your face.
It was...
I'll tell you a quick story. My cousin, I don't know what she is. I don't know what she's majoring in. She wants to be a veterinarian, so she's majoring in a science. I don't know what. And her head is crammed in the books 24/7.
Yeah, I had no life. Everyone always... So I'll tell you.
Her life is Netflix only, and that's only for like 30 minutes a day, maybe.
It's funny because I talk to other alum, and they're always like, I had such a great time. I did this. I'm like, yeah, you guys were clearly North Campus majors because... So UCLA is divided between North and South Campus. And so North is all the liberal arts people and South is all science and engineering. And I mean, it even looks different. Granted, I don't go to campus much anymore, but back in the day, North Campus was like there's sculptures and there's grass and people are happy and singing under the trees. And then you go to South Campus and everyone's angry. So I think one of the tips I had was just I tried not to be on South Campus if I didn't have to be.
I know one of my roommates in college, he was an engineer major, and he literally had no life. So I have an idea of what you science people and you engineers have to go through.
Yeah.
You guys don't really enjoy... I mean, if you take your craft seriously, you don't get that 100% college experience that the movies like to portray.
Yeah. And that's, with the kid I'm mentoring now, the student I'm mentoring now, I always tell him, do well in your classes, but make sure to take time for you and enjoy these years because you're not going to get them back.
What advice would you give to someone who's a biology major right now at any university and they want to make that leap to go to medical school? So strictly talking as an undergrad biology major, what advice or tips could you give them?
Just do really well in your science classes because when you apply to medical school, they look at your overall GPA, but they also look at your science GPA. And so one interesting thing that I've noted is that a lot of physicians who are first gens, they all were science majors because that's kind of how we thought we had to do it. Whereas if you talk to people who come from physician families, a lot of them were like art history or poli-sci because they got to take those other classes and kind of
raise their GPA.
For lack of a better way of putting it. Like they weren't taking 4 hard science classes at once.
Yeah. So
they got to keep their GPA high and maybe enjoy the college experience more. I don't know. I don't want to...
That's how that comes with experience. Like you said, first generation you think like, okay, A, B, C, D, major, be a science person in high school, major in science, that's going to lead me to medical school, right?
And there's so many paths you could take.
And it's like what you said, but the only people who know that are people that have been through the path or that come through families that have been through the path and they know the other paths that can be taken. So my aunt, she was first generation UCLA too, but her kids, she's making sure that they don't take that rigorous path because she doesn't want, like you said, she doesn't want them taking those 4 hard classes at the same time. It's unnecessary to do that. She wants to increase her kids' chances of going to medical school or law school the best that she can. So like, I really recently found out that you could major in music and still go to law school.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't do that. Like you said, basket weaving. But like you said, a first generation person will think like, I have to major in political science and then go to law school and then just make their lives they just make the journey a little bit harder for themselves.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think just you should major in what you like because you'll do well in it if you enjoy it and it'll make you a more interesting, well-rounded person later on down the line.
Well, I hope this podcast really opens up people's eyes that they don't have to major in something they don't want to just to get to their destination.
Yeah, I would just advise find out what prereqs there are, if any, do very well in them, and do a lot of extracurriculars. And, if you really want to do something, you're going to do it.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you go from a biology major graduating to a high school biology teacher?
So when I finished college, I definitely was not ready to apply to medical school. And not just that, I had to pay everything myself. My family, as awesome as they are, couldn't help me. So teaching was something that I always loved. So I decided to pursue that for a bit. And so, it was very different because when I taught, I was used to being a nerdy honors student, and they don't give those kind of kids to the first year teachers. So
that means you would have gotten a student like me.
I no comments. Yeah, it was just hard because, as much as I wanted to be there and be a role model for these kids, it was, I would get comments like, well, why are you a teacher? You drive a Nissan. I could make more money slanging. And you're just like,
really?
Oh my gosh.
So a student told you that?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So it's just like, you could tell them, well, yeah, but then you end up dead or in jail. But, to the adolescent brain, they don't care. They just see the ultimate. They're just like, whatever. So, I did that, and it was good. It got me over my fear of public speaking. It taught me a lot about just organizational skills, because you have to be organized to be a good teacher. And I think the big challenge was, I don't think any of my kids read at grade level, and science is a whole other language. So how do you teach science to a group of people who aren't even reading where they're supposed to? And how do you get them interested in it?
How did you do that?
Well,
I'm interested now.
I tried to make it as entertaining as I could. So, for example, when I was teaching them the genetics unit, this is so bad that I did this, and I can't believe I'm admitting to it, but we did Punnett squares, but we did the Jerry Springer show.
Okay.
So you had to figure out who was the dad. And then I think I gave them extra points if they drew the family afterwards.
That's pretty cool. That would have had me interested in biology. Maybe my career path would have been different if my high school teacher was that cool.
I can't believe I just admitted that.
So, how did you become a high school teacher? Don't you have to get credentials or anything like that?
So that's the problem, is I went on an emergency credential, and unfortunately, that I don't know that you can do that anymore. First of all, I did that many years ago, but the kids who need the best teachers, unfortunately, get the teachers like me, straight out of college, no experience, no credential, very underprepared. And so it was very eye-opening, just in terms of equity for education, healthcare access, whatnot. And that kind of was what started me onto my journey of trying to achieve that, amongst underrepresented populations.
What would you say to those currently who are biology teachers or science teachers that are teaching middle school or high school?
God bless you.
It's a real tough subject, because I know I slept a lot during those classes. And like you said, it's hard. It's a whole other language. So what would you say to those people just to try to get their students more engaged and to try to get the subject more fun? I feel like there's not enough maybe Latinos who are physicists, chemists, and biologists, and I would love to see more of that. I think it starts at middle school and the high school level.
Yeah. So I would agree with that wholeheartedly. We Latinos are very underrepresented in the STEM fields. One of my volunteer things that I do is a program called Hippocrates Circle. And so what we do, there's a middle school here in the LA area that a group of us go to, and we just try to get kids interested in medical school. And, we take them on a tour of the hospital, and then there's another day where we let them do certain procedures and just try to pique their interest that way. But I just think the kids need to see themselves represented in these jobs. That's how it's going to happen. That's how they're going to have the motivation to do it.
I think it's important too to give, like you said, to volunteer. I think other people, we relate to each other culturally. So if another Latino student or a young person sees another Latino in that position, being a scientist, being a doctor, or something like that, it might just give them that encouragement that they need.
I could do it.
Yeah, that can
do it. If she could do it, I could do it.
Exactly.
And I hear that at work a lot.
I really encourage everyone in the sciences, if you could give back to the community that way, try anything and everything you can, because I like to see more Latinos in the sciences.
Oh, for sure.
How did you find the time to study for the MCAT, or how did you study for the MCAT? That's one of the most notorious tests in the world, at least in the United States.
You know what though? I thought the MCAT was bad, and then I took my boards, and that was a whole other level of awful.
No. We'll get to the.
So
We'll get to the boards test after.
So what I want to talk about, when you sign up to be a doctor, what you don't realize that you're signing up for is just standardized test after standardized test. So the MCAT, like, I don't even remember how many hours long it was anymore. I took it so long ago.
It's like a 5-hour day or longer.
It might have
Were you
been.
about to say that's nothing anymore?
I remember when I took like my board exams, they were up to 8 hours.
Yeah.
So you just have to get good at test taking. That's all I could say. And you think like, oh, once the MCAT's over, that's it. No, that's not it. So just be prepared to jump through hoop after hoop if you're going to sign up to be a physician.
But so, well, how did you study for the MCAT? Like, I studied for the LSAT. So when I studied for the LSAT, I never went to law school, by the way, but I did study for it. There was all these boards, and people have like forums online. People have all these tricks, all these things that they want, recommendations. What did you do personally to study for the MCAT? Like, how many hours a day? What did you study? Did you go through Kaplan? Did you just self-study?
I went through a test review course. I don't remember which one it was, but I think what I'm about to say can be extrapolated to all standardized tests. And that is, it's just a matter of pattern recognition.
That's the same thing for the LSAT too.
Right. And so there's only X number of ways they can ask you the material. So you just kind of have to figure out all of the different ways. And it's just about practice and just getting your hands on as many test questions as possible. And I got better at doing it as time went on. But that's all it is. It's just getting your hands on the right resources.
After taking the notorious MCAT comes applying to medical schools. Could you talk about your experience?
Yes. It was a very long, arduous, and expensive process. So basically, you have to apply broadly. Like, you can't just be like, oh, I want to go to UCLA and that's it. No, you have to definitely go outside of California and apply to as many schools as your budget allows.
But we're fortunate enough in California. We have a lot of medical schools here.
But they're really hard to get into.
Okay, that's
so.
Right.
A lot of Californians end up going out of state for med school. Yeah, and then it's funny because I did residency in LA, and I saw a lot of people I did undergrad with who went away for med school and then came back to train. So it's a very common thing. So yeah, you apply broadly. There's like one, and granted, I applied back in, I want to say 2005. So I don't know if things have changed since then. But you send your primary application out and you pay the initial fee. And then some schools will reject you right away. Some schools will send you what's called a secondary application.
Is that good news or bad news?
You don't know. Okay, some schools automatically give you the secondary, take your money and reject you.
Wow.
Some schools will send you the secondary, have you write a bunch of essays. And then if you go on, then the next stage is the interview. And so then you have to go to as many of those as you get invited to. And then from there, they can accept you, they can waitlist you, or they can reject you.
That sounds like an anxious process.
It's horrible. I don't wish it on anyone. I think the key to survival in this field, and many fields, but just develop very thick skin and have a good support system.
To which medical schools did you apply to altogether?
Oh, gosh.
If you remember.
I mean, clearly, I didn't go to school in California, so there was no love there. I was waitlisted at UCSD until the very end. I ended up going to University of Kansas.
Woo, woo. Those are the Jayhawks, right?
Yeah, Rock Chalk.
There you go.
Jayhawk.
What other schools did you apply to? You said broadly, so I'm guessing what other states did you apply to? What other schools? I want to hear them all if you remember.
That would take a long time.
Really?
And, yeah.
Okay, just name a couple more then.
I got into University of Illinois as well. I was waitlisted at Michigan State, and oh gosh, there was another one I interviewed at, and I can't. Oh, it's been a while. Yeah, it was a lot of schools. Definitely applied to all the UCs, USC.
I can see why it was expensive.
Yeah, because each school is like X amount of money, and then the secondary. So you could see why I had to teach to be able to save up to do all of that, and then the schools don't pay your interview and hotel and things like that. So it racks up very, very quickly.
Yeah, it's literally an investment.
Yes.
What were you looking for in medical school? So every medical school has their specialty, right, or what they're known for. What at that point, which medical schools were you applying to that had what you wanted?
So I think the key to med school is the best one is the one you get into. And I wasn't a big research person, so, going to a huge research institution wasn't at the top list of...
So cross those off right away.
Well, I mean, if they would have said yes, I wouldn't have said no.
Got it. Okay.
But, I got a couple of acceptances and ended up going to KU. And it actually fit me pretty well. They're very primary care oriented, which is what I do now. But I didn't know I was going to do primary care when I started med school. So I was just basically a blank slate and, kind of just went with it when I got there.
How excited were you when you finally got accepted? Just when the first medical school said, well, you're accepted here.
It was really cool. Funny story. The lady from the admissions office called my phone and she said she was from KU and she asked for someone else. And
Oh, no.
it was horrible. So I was like, no, but I applied to your school. And she's like, oh, we actually wanted you. So that's how I found out.
More anxiety on top of it.
Yes. And I was driving to work that day. And then I pulled over and I was just like screaming, crying, called my mom. The rest of the day is a blur. I was just so excited.
For those interviews, do you have to go to the school and interview over there?
Yeah, you have to fly.
Ooh, that's what I'm saying. It could get
It
really
racks up.
expensive
It does.
real quick.
It does.
Nowadays, do they just do it through like FaceTime or Skype? Or
I
not
don't
even?
think so. I think
You still have to,
because
fly.
they want you to see the campus. They want you to see what they can offer you as well as what you can offer them.
Yeah.
So I think it's good that you go to get a feel for the people there, to go and see what life is like on a day-to-day basis, see if the students are happy. Usually during the lunchtime, like they'll kind of pull you aside and tell you what's up.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
They do it like voluntarily?
Sometimes.
Like,
sometimes they're that disgruntled.
Don't come to the school. I'm warning you now.
No. I think it's just good to interact with as many people who go there as possible so you can get a good feel for what's really happening.
Tell me about your experiences and your feelings when you first arrived to medical school. You said you applied to UCLA because you were kind of afraid to leave home. So this is your first time leaving home, right?
Yeah,
so
it was.
How was it as a first generation Latina medical student arriving to the University of Kansas Medical School?
I mean, I was just kind of like, what did I just sign up for, right? I remember leaving LAX and landing in Kansas City, and there's like cows when you're flying over, and I was just like, what did I just do? But I have to say I had some of the greatest classmates you could ask for, some of whom I'm still in touch with to this day, and honestly, they were what helped me survive the whole experience. As far as diversity of the class, not super diverse. I think I was maybe one of like 3 Latinos in my class.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you say class, I mean entering class, right?
Entering class. So I think, if I remember correctly, we had 175 people starting at the same time as me.
So you said 3 in your class. Do you know how many there were altogether?
I mean,
more or less throughout the years?
I would say, 3 to 5 is about what they would recruit in
Yeah.
general. Like, it's not a lot. I think California might do a little bit better at getting a diverse class, but that's reflective of the state demographics.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think still in general, Latinos, African Americans, Native Americans are very grossly underrepresented in the field of medicine.
How did you feel about that? Did you feel like there was maybe even more pressure on your back to represent yourself in the
definitely.
community?
I mean, you definitely don't want to. I mean, I got comments like, oh, she got in because she's Latina. And it's like, well, I passed the same tests you did.
Yeah.
So you definitely, you don't want to, you want to justify your position in the class. And I got funny comments from people, like the what kind of ethnic question. And I really wanted to respond the offended kind, but I didn't. And it wasn't asked out of malice. It was just,
I think because
they don't know what to do with you.
It's because
right?
The lack of diversity. So exactly. They don't know what to do. Because I guess in that culture, there's not like a lot. At that time, there's not a lot of diversity. There still isn't. So do you think that's why?
And I think I just think that particular person who asked me, like,
Okay.
it wasn't a bad-hearted comment. It's just like she genuinely just didn't understand, like, like maybe that's not the best way to phrase something.
Understood. How was your first year in undergrad? It's people say, the usual saying is that you could survive your first year of undergrad, you could survive the rest of the years. Is that the same thing for medical school?
They were challenging in a different way as time went on. The first 2 years of medical school are what they call basic sciences. And so you're learning a lot of stuff that I'm going to admit now I don't use at all as a practicing physician, but you have to learn it to go on. So you learn your biochem, your microbiology, all of that stuff. And it's just a lot of info crammed into very little time. And so you have to get through those years. You have to pass the boards to go on to the clinical years. And I feel like that's where I shined more because I wasn't great at, memorizing so much info in so little time. Like I passed, but did I graduate at the top of my class? No, because, that was hard.
Do you have any advice for someone listening to this podcast that is in medical school or is going to go to medical school? What advice do you have to them? It's 4 years, right? Medical school? Mm-hmm. What advice do you have for them to survive those 4 years or daily practices that they can do day by day, weekly by weekly, so they can graduate from medical school?
So I would just say take one day at a time. Don't try to bite off all 4 years, just in one day because you're going to make yourself miserable. I would say don't equate your self-esteem with your academic performance because, it's just so intense and you are a unique individual that brings a lot to your medical school class, right? So you're not just grades, you're not just a test score, you're a human, you're an individual, you have wonderful attributes and you have to remember that and not lose sight of it. And you have to take care of yourself, make time to exercise, take 5 minutes to call your family, while you're walking to class or whatever, because those are the things that are going to keep you sane and healthy.
Is there honestly a social life in medical school?
Yeah. I think you're not going to be out there being crazy or anything, but I think because your classmates are going through the trenches with you, you do become very close to some of them.
It makes it easier because you see other people are going through the same thing you're going through. So you don't feel left. You don't get the fear of missing out syndrome, right?
No. And, it was interesting because I went to med school thinking that it was going to be really cutthroat like undergrad was, and it was completely the opposite. People would make study guides and then email them out to the class. So it was much more of a collaborative environment.
A community for sure.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that.
No, neither did I.
Do you think that was just an anomaly?
No.
Is that general practice? Because I feel like I know in law school people want to graduate first in class, so they're killing each other.
There are people who care about that sort of thing, but for the most part, and again, I don't know if they've changed their grading system. Some med schools are pass, no pass.
Okay.
So, at that point, you just want everyone to do well.
When in medical school did you decide that you want to become a pediatrician?
I would say my third year. I started wanting to be, or thinking I wanted to be, an adult cardiologist. And my first rotation was OB-GYN. And sorry to my OB-GYN friends out there, it was not for me. I did not enjoy it.
What is that exactly? I don't even know what that is.
Obstetrics and gynecology.
Okay.
It's a great field for those people who are interested in it. You'll find that people will pick specialties according to personality types, and it wasn't my cup of tea. And then I went on to pediatrics next, and I loved it. Like I just felt like I wasn't at work because I was having fun all the time, and it was just cool to interact with the kids, and I try to talk myself out of it.
Why or how?
So, I think one problem is that pediatricians are very grossly underpaid in comparison to other specialties. And so my thought was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have all this debt. Like, how am I ever going to get out of it? Do I pick a specialty just because it's high paying, or do I pick it because it's what I like? So I did it, and then the next rotation was adult medicine, and I thought like, okay, well, this is where I'm going to shine. Like, this is what I want to do. And I hated it. Like, I went to the VA, and there were these like old curmudgeons, and they were just awful to deal with. And sorry to my friends who do adult medicine who are listening, but you guys know peds was, way more my thing than adults ever were. God bless you people for doing what you do.
The other Latinos that you were with in medical school, did you guys naturally click? Did you guys help each other out? Or?
Yeah, we tried to. I mean, there was the Latino Midwest Medical Student Association, and like we had little events and whatnot, but there was just so few of us that it wasn't like a huge network where we could share our culture on a big scale. Like we definitely, you know, we had like our pan dulce fundraiser or salsa night, but it just...
How did you get the pan dulces there? Did someone make them?
You know, there's
are they sold there?
They are. There's a district in Kansas City, the Argentine district, I believe, where you could get that kind of stuff. And
nice.
there are Latinos there. There are.
Yeah. But it's just like, wait, pan dulce in Kansas? I don't know.
Yeah, no, you have to know where to look.
So you mentioned that, you know, in the interview process for medical school and while you're there, you know, people value your diversity, or they value who you are. I guess, and you said that you don't have, for medical school, they want as many unique individuals as possible. Mm-hmm. I guess for that uniqueness that individual holds, how does that exactly shine in medical school?
Oh, there's so many ways to answer that question. You know, I mean, I had classmates that went and served in other countries, you know, like doing mission work. There were people, there was one person who came in as a former Marine drill sergeant. There was another one who started in her 40s as an engineer. So everyone has something unique to bring to the table. Like it's hard to just say like, oh, you know, I think non-traditional applicants enrich a class basically.
So after medical school, what happens next? What's the usual route from there? So you graduate, you're in your white coats. It's happy graduation day. From there, where does
So you have like a month or so off and you're like, oh, I'm a doctor, I'm awesome. And then reality hits and you become an intern. And yeah, that's just a tough year for everyone.
After the year after graduating.
Yeah. So you're a doctor, but you know very little. You have a white coat, but I feel like the janitor knows more than you do at that point. Intern, what they don't tell you, it's like you're basically a glorified secretary. You're the one putting in all the orders, answering all the pages. It is the most awful year. You just have to get through it. That's the only advice I could say.
What's that period of time called again?
Intern year.
Intern year, yeah.
Depending on your specialty. So everyone does an intern year and then you do residency. My specialty is peds, so I did 1 year of internship and then 2 years of residency. But other specialties can do more years of residency training. And then you can go on further from there and do what's called a fellowship. So that could be anywhere from 2 to 3 extra years of training on top of your residency.
So what did you do? You did 1 year of internship, 2 years of residency?
Yeah, and then I was done.
Did you have to, residency is like kind of like medical school part 2?
No, it's different. So for the first time, you can put in orders. You have a little bit more authority to do stuff. When you're a med student, you take your notes and you think your notes are very important. And then you realize once you get to the hospital in an internship setting that like nobody really cares. But we'd like the students to think that we do. But so it's not med school part 2. It's just different because now you have to learn how to manage patients on your own. The med school part of it is just learning how to be a doctor. But now it's just how to execute functions, basically. Every year that passes, there's a hierarchy that you go through. So when you're a resident, you oversee the interns, make sure they're not screwing up orders. You're supposed to devise, or the intern comes to you with their plan, and then you say that it's okay or it's not okay. And then you have the attending over you who's kind of responsible for everyone. So I think the scary part is once you're done training and you become the attending, you're like, oh my gosh, where's my safety net? It's not there. It's me. So
the reason why I say is residency part 2, because you do have to intern for it. It's kind of like a whole application process again, right? Like it's pretty rigorous.
So the way that it works when you apply for residency is, so first of all, you have to pick your specialty. And depending on how competitive your specialty is, determines how many interviews you're going to do, right? So plastic surgery, dermatology, ophthalmology, radiology, things like that. Those guys do tons of interviews, and those people tend to have the highest board scores because those spots are very few and far between. So what everyone ends up doing is you go to the interview and then you rank all the programs that you interviewed at, and then the programs rank all of the applicants, and from there it goes to a computerized match. And so you get one program, and then
an algorithm, basically.
Yeah, and wherever you get sent is where you go.
Sounds pretty crazy.
It's crazy. My school actually made you go up on stage and open the envelope in front of everyone. And there were definitely people who were not happy with their envelopes.
You could just tell by their faces?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, when you say go on stage, like graduation stage, right?
So we had a ceremony in the auditorium of our med school. And so they would call out your name and you had to go up on stage and open your envelope. And, hopefully it was a good one.
Yeah. So I forgot to ask you this question. We could go back a little bit. For medical school, when you interview, what kind of questions do they ask you?
Oh, gosh. It could be anything, right? They might ask you ethical questions. They might ask you, what's your favorite movie? Like, who knows? It's like whatever the interview. It's
literally a lottery?
Yeah, and you have to be prepared for anything. Like, I remember I got a question about, this is a popular question that they ask. You have a patient that needs a blood transfusion, but they're a Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, no.
What do you do? And I think in this case, it was a pediatric patient. And so the answer that I gave, and I guess it satisfied him because I got in.
I want to hear it.
It was, by denying the blood transfusion, you deny the child the right to live and therefore make medical decisions for himself as an adult in the future. So I would give the transfusion. I don't know. I don't know. I think the thing that
did they give you a thumbs up? That was a great answer, Kimberly.
Sometimes they're very stoic and poker face, and you're just oh my gosh, like I hope I didn't offend someone. But the thing that I learned later on is that there's hospital ethics committees for things like this.
So it's kind of like a trick question.
Yeah. A lot of the things that they tend to ask you, it's not necessarily that there's a right or wrong answer. It's how do you respond to the pressure?
It's like,
and can you think on your feet? Yeah.
It's like these crazy questions I hear from Google all the time. Like, if you were like a miniature version of yourself and you're in a blender, how would you get out? It's not about the right answer. They just want to see
how you arrive to that conclusion.
How you're going to arrive to that conclusion.
That's very much what it is.
That's what it sounds like to me. So now to the residency interview questions, I'm interested. What kind of questions do they ask you when you were applying for residency?
Those ones tended to be a lot more relaxed. And it was just kind of, because you're interviewing them as well, right? So they asked about me, about my background, what am I looking for in a program, And at that time, I think I did 10 interviews. 8 in California, 1 in Arizona, and 1 in Texas.
Did you have to fly to those too?
Yeah, you had to just send
more airplanes for you.
Well, luckily I wanted to come home so badly that, for most of them, I got to stay in SoCal. I did my little tour of Northern California as well, but I knew deep down, like, this is where I wanted to be. So, it's been such a long time since I've had these interviews that I don't remember exact questions, but I remember that they were a lot more benign than the ones for medical school.
So after residency, do you have to take any more tests?
Yes. You have to take your specialty boards. That test was the worst test ever. I remember feeling like I was failing it the entire time I was taking it. And I passed, and I didn't just pass, I did well, but, they prep you for 3 years. And there's a lot of stigma that goes with failing your boards because people can look that up and see that you're not board certified.
Yeah. Does it matter if you failed it once but you passed it?
As long as you pass it in the end, you're good.
Got it. But I thought you meant like that always stuck with you. Like, no, you failed it once. It's always going to be attached to you.
No.
Okay.
The key is you just pass. That's the important thing. But it's a very expensive test. Like I said, you're taking a lot of tests in this job, and they're never cheap. This one was, I think, like $2,300 when I took it.
Ooh, you better pass the first time.
Yeah, I'm telling you, nobody tells you when you sign up for this. Like, there's a lot of tests. There's so much money you're going to have to pay to take these tests. You better pass.
You should have the Dr. Willard blog page and just have everyone give everyone the heads up what they're getting.
I'm doing this podcast so that people can know what I wish I knew 20 years ago.
I'm going to market it so much so that way every potential medical student knows what they're getting into.
It's a great job.
So one of the things that really caught my attention about you on your resume is your volunteer work about Operation Smile. Could you talk about that?
Oh, that was one of the most amazing, life-changing experiences that I've ever done. I've done a couple of missions. I would love to do more. It's just that right now we have to take vacation time if we want to do those kind of things. So I will do it with time. So the first one I did was in Paraguay. It was the year after I finished residency. And so for those who don't know, Operation Smile is a nonprofit organization that goes to developing countries, and they give free surgeries to patients that have cleft lips and cleft palates. And so what happens is these people will bring their kids from miles around, sometimes like 300 and something plus kids, and you screen them all in a day, and you have these teams of physicians that screen them with you, and you decide who is a surgical candidate, and then from there they schedule the kids to go to the OR, and then there's usually like 5 days or so of operations, and you're churning out like 25, 30 kids in that day. Maybe not 30. It was maybe like somewhere in the 20s. And it's really cool because these kids get by with such minimal resources compared to what they would get in the States having the same surgeries, and they just do it, and they're so resilient, and they have such a good attitude, and they're so appreciative about it. It's just so cool to watch. And the people were just so wonderful. Like all the people who volunteer for those kind of things are just awesome to work with, and just very eye-opening, very life-changing.
That's why I had to ask you that question. It seems like, it comes from the goodness of your heart and from the other people too as well, the other doctors that volunteer their time to help others. I
think a lot of we do those kind of things because that's why you go into medicine, right? You want to help people, and that's helping people at its purest, right? Like there's no profit to be made. There's no like, let's churn out a bunch of people. No, it's just like the reward of watching a kid who, or not even just a kid, like there are people who live their whole lives with cleft lips and then got them fixed, and then watching them look at themselves in the mirror for the first time. Like it was just such a neat thing to get to see.
What was your exact position, or what did you exactly do for Operation Smile?
So I was the general pediatrician, or one of the general pediatricians. So my role was a little bit different. So we kind of talked about like the preoperative screening where, we determined whether or not a patient was a good surgical candidate. And then the day of the surgery, we would make sure that they were still clear. For example, if someone catches a cold the day that they're going to get an operation, then they're probably not clear for the OR, and then you have to tell them no. And I hated having to do that. It was not.
Was that pretty common? Like denying people the day of?
It happened here and there. I wouldn't say a lot, but it did happen. And then post-operatively, you were just making sure that, they didn't develop any complications and that their pain was controlled, those kind of things.
That sounds super cool. How did you end up choosing Operation Smile? I'm sure there's so many different nonprofits throughout the world.
It's funny. I think I just saw an infomercial on TV and I applied, and I applied when I was still a resident, and then I didn't hear anything. And then after I finished residency, they called me and they offered, I want to say Peru, but I had just taken my peds boards, and so like my funds were wiped out, and I was just like, I can't travel right now. And then I think they called back later and offered a chance to go to the Philippines, and again I was just like, guys, I just took my boards, I'm sorry. And then after I had been working for a little bit, they called again, and I was like, you know what, this is such a great opportunity, I don't want to keep turning them down, and I'm really glad I didn't. It still stands out as one of the most rewarding experiences of my clinical career.
Well, when you sent your resume, it definitely stood out to me.
Oh, thank you.
I know. So aside from that volunteer work, you also volunteer here in LA too. I know you're part of the UCLA Latino Association.
The UCLA Latino Alumni Association.
So yes. What's that about, and what do you do for them?
So there's a lot of things that they do. I think it would be a disservice to claim that I know everything, because I go to the events that I can go to with that my schedule allows me to. One of the things that I've done is I'm one of the panelists when students are applying for the scholarship. Panelists isn't the right word. Judges? I don't know.
You can say judge.
Yeah. So basically, we interview the scholarship candidates. They come and they sit at a table with the judges, and we have a standardized set of questions that we ask them, and then we rank them and decide, who's going to get the scholarship and who's not. And it's a great cause. UCLA Latino Alumni Association, if you guys want to donate. Sorry, I'm going to do my shameless plug.
No worries. Go for it. That's what this podcast is for.
Those kids, donating to them will help more first-gen students get to pursue their educational dreams. So it's a great cause.
2 questions. How do potential students apply for that scholarship?
I think when they get into UCLA, there's like a little box that they check that they can apply.
Got it. And that's not just for that scholarship. Scholarships in general. What advice do you give to students who are applying for scholarships? How can they stand out more to receive a scholarship?
Just apply. Be very aggressive. Kids now have an advantage that I didn't have when I was that age, and that's the internet, right? So you can literally Google first generation Latino scholarships, and there's so many resources, and just apply. The worst they can say is no, right? And find someone who can interview you, find somebody who writes well and will critique you and make you better, and then just be determined and just keep applying.
I wish I had applied for scholarships.
Me too.
I would have saved myself and my friends so much money. I'm following someone on LinkedIn. I don't know who he is. He's all about helping first generation Latinos, and like every day he has a lead to a new scholarship. I was like, why had this existed, or had I been more aggressive, I would apply to all these scholarships.
I think that's just the key. The worst they could say is no. Just try.
Exactly. I know you also do volunteer work for Animal Ralph Bunche Charter School. Could you talk about that as well?
Sure. So it's been a while since I've gotten the chance to do work with them. But one of my best friends, Mr. Brian Gonzalez, I'm going to give you a shout out. Love you, B. He's one of their teachers. I believe he teaches history. And he's a great role model for his students. And so he invites me to come in and talk about my experiences as a first-gen Latina student, doing medicine. And so it's just a great forum for the students to get to ask me whatever they want to. But I feel like I do that every day at work with my teenage patients. Like, I definitely address health concerns with them and try to make sure that they're making good decisions, but also I try to add that little extra to each of their visits. Like, okay, where are you applying? What are you doing? Because I want them to have as much info as I can possibly give them in that short appointment time.
I just really want to emphasize your volunteer work, and I really applaud you for that.
Thank you.
I don't know personally a lot of doctors, but I know the doctors I've had in the past, a lot of them just look jaded, like from their career, from being a doctor. And I know if they're jaded in that, they're definitely not giving back to their community. They just don't have the energy for it. So you have good energy, good vibes.
Thank you.
I love the volunteer work, and I could tell you're not a jaded doctor.
Yes. No, I'm just kidding. I think the volunteer work helps me from being jaded.
So I just want to say thank you for giving back to the community, and thank you for giving back to the Latino community to inspire them.
Of course.
One of the most interesting things about you too is your Univision appearances.
Oh gosh.
So I guess the first question is, how did you get invited to be on Univision?
It just randomly happened. They sent me an email, asked if I wanted to do it.
Random.
Yeah, okay, first of all,
no connection to Univision at all.
So doctors from my company, okay, big HMO, we make media appearances here and there, and there's not a lot of Spanish-speaking doctors. So they reached out and asked if I'd be willing to do the interview. So that's what happened.
See, everyone, that's the advantage to being bilingual.
Oh, totally. And I used to fight my mom so much about speaking Spanish, and she would talk to me in Spanish, and I'd answer her in English, and she'd be like, no te entiendo, and I'm like, you're such a liar. But now I thank her. Look, Mom, it's on recording, okay? Thank you. Yeah, it's afforded some awesome opportunities in my life to be bilingual.
So then they sent out the email, and then did you just jump on the opportunity?
Well, they directed it to me.
They did, okay.
Yeah, so one of the ones that I did was tips from the doctor on how to diminish fear in kids when they visit the doctor's office. So I got to be on Despierta America.
So why was that the topic? Was there like an epidemic at that time where kids were afraid
No,
to go
I
to the
think it was
doctor?
just I think it was just kind of a thing that they wanted to talk about. So like one of the things we talked about is, don't threaten your kids with getting shots, because then you're just going to build this fear. Like, shots aren't there as punishment. They're there because it's important to get them. I'm very pro-vaccine, by the way, so I will plug that until the end of time.
So, but how did you feel appearing on TV? Like, were you nervous?
Oh, yes, of
how
course.
did you prepare for this? Was your big moment.
So yeah, it was pretty nerve-wracking. I am bilingual. I make fun of my own Spanish speaking abilities. I'm not as articulate as I would like to be, but I feel like I've gotten better. So I just had family members prep me and grill me and correct me. And it was like the one time where I was okay not being corrected every other sentence, until I thought I sounded okay. And I tried to come up, and this is for any interview, I just try to think of all the things they could ask me so that I'm not thinking so extemporaneously.
I think you had another appearance on Univision too. What was that one about?
That one was why you should not shake your infants.
Okay.
Because you can cause a lot of damage. And that one was like at 5 a.m. and we had to go to the studio, and I'm not coherent at that hour, so it was interesting.
So anyone, have you seen Dr. Willard on Univision? Yeah, that was her.
That was me.
Do you know if you're going to be doing any more appearances?
Not that I know of anytime soon.
You kind of already mentioned, and I think everyone's impressed about how you're getting back to the community, how you're just coming onto the podcast and encouraging other Latinos to pursue careers in sciences and to medical school. But just in case you want to add anything more to the question, how are you as a Latina paving a way for other Latinos to pursue these careers and to go to medical school?
I mean, I just try to help wherever I can. And if people can look at me and say, hey, she did it, so can I. If I can motivate even one student to do that, I've done my job. I just want to make things easier and create more room so that, more of us can be sharing in this field, in these successes.
And from the very start of your medical career, even from the start when you were interested in biology till now, with all the knowledge that you know, all the experiences that you have, what never ceases to amaze you about the human body?
Oh gosh, there's the way that they teach you in the textbook, and then there's, reality. And they're two very different things. There's standardized textbook world, and then you'll see all these crazy anatomic variants, and you're just like, what? Like, I've never seen a case like this. Like, I should write an article about it. Like, that's crazy. But one of the reasons I chose to be a pediatrician is because kids are just so resilient. And you'll see these kids going through these horrible processes like neuroblastoma, which is a kind of cancer, getting chemo. And they're just so mature and wise for their years and so resilient. And to me, that's just amazing that they could do that, because I can think of some adult patients that would be going through that and just be a lot whinier about it. And these kids are just, it's baffling. How do they do this? Like, I just look up to them, like these little 5-year-olds.
What's your theory that kids are more resilient than adults?
I think because they haven't lived along to do bad adult things to themselves. What I mean by that is
no regrets.
No.
Like, for example, if someone, like, they haven't smoked, they haven't drank,
Exactly.
they haven't abused their body, and those people are looking back at
Exactly.
life like, I shouldn't have done that, so they put themselves down. So
one of my roles as a pediatrician is to hopefully prevent them from ever doing those kind of things, to get them to eat well, get them to exercise. They have more reserve, basically, versus like an old 75-year-old COPD who's on oxygen. It's like, well, ya para qué?
Yeah.
Okay, I know it sounds harsh, and I don't mean it to, but in peds world, that's usually not the case. And that to me is just fascinating, and it's one of the reasons why I do what I do.
It's obvious from your voice and your answers that you've clearly demonstrated what you like being a pediatrician, but as everything in life, there's always a negative side. What don't you like about being a doctor? What don't you like about being a pediatrician? It could be as simple as just doing paperwork.
Okay, so I would say charting is not my favorite thing about my job. I think, as much as I hate that I've discussed this so much during the episode, but there's debt, right? And so that precludes some people from wanting to pursue their dreams. So I wish that that weren't a thing. I wish that medical education or just education in this country were more easily attainable to families who don't necessarily have those kind of resources. And as far as being a practicing physician on a day-to-day, it would be amazing if I got to spend as much time with patients as I wanted to and got to address everything that they wanted addressed and didn't have to click all the boxes. But that's one of the realities of being a practicing doctor in this country at this time.
Dr. Kimberly Willard, I want to thank you for your time. You've taken time out of this beautiful day to to basically be our mentor for the Latino community, and I really want to thank you for that, and I just have a lot of gratitude for that.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.